What is up, everyone? OG over here from PlayerEssence, and welcome to the PE Nintendo Switch and Gaming News video. Today, we're going to be talking about the dynamic going on in Japan because there was an article that I came across from MCV, shoutouts to everyone who linked this to me, about Microsoft not being very supportive about Japanese games. And this is coming from a couple different smaller but pretty big developers when it comes to the Japanese scene. Now, we're going to be talking about this when it comes to Microsoft, and of course we're going to be discussing Nintendo's resurgence when it comes to certain games being announced for the Nintendo Switch, especially when it comes to stuff like Blaze Blue Cross Tag Battle coming to the Switch, also Lost Spheres coming to the Switch over Xbox One, Dragon Quest XI as well. So there are a number of Japanese titles that have started to skip the Xbox platform and have moved over to the Nintendo Switch, whereas before that probably came to the Xbox platform before, just because of various reasons, whether the Wii U wasn't successful or the Wii wasn't powerful enough to do what some of the developers were doing. Things are kind of changing. So let's go ahead and get into this article here first. So ever since the launch of the original Xbox, and shoutouts to MCV for the article, Microsoft has tried and largely failed to break into the Japanese market. Even now, it often sells no more than 50 Xbox One S consoles each week, according to Famitsu data, while the Nintendo Switch and PS4 rivals regularly shift upwards of 20,000 units. Even Phil Spencer had to admit last year that the Xbox simply didn't have any games that Japanese gamers typically enjoy. Quote, "A lot of Japanese gamers really seem to like games such as Persona 5 or Neo," he said in an interview with Play Asia. "If we plan on doing better in the Japanese market, we want to release games that the average Japanese gamer will really enjoy." Indeed, with Bandai Namco's occupying a large part of Microsoft's E3 press conference this year, with titles such as Dragon Ball FighterZ and Code Vein taking center stage, things may well be on the up for the platform holder. However, according to publisher NIS America, Microsoft needs to do much more than simply get the right type of games onto the Xbox One. Isn't going to be enough to turn around for Microsoft. Quote, "Honestly speaking, Microsoft's approach to Japanese games hasn't been very supportive," NIS America President and CEO Takuro Yamashita told MCV. "Microsoft, for Japanese games, there's still a very niche element to them, no matter what it might be. Microsoft also has a minimum order quantity for their games, as a whole structure isn't really geared towards niche games or smaller games like Japanese titles, so they're not really supportive of Japanese games or developers. That's not to say that NIS America won't ever release a game on Xbox. However, we always try and pay attention to the demand and see where our fan base is," senior associate producer Alan Costa added. "We're obviously not opposed to trying new things. Disgaea 5 on Switch was one of those, and it paid off, which is why we're definitely moving forward with that. I think that if the right game presented itself, a game that already had a certain level of awareness for people, we'd definitely be interested in giving it a chance, but it's a chicken and egg problem." Now moving on here, Nihon Falcom President Toshiro Kondo agrees, telling MCV he, quote, "isn't diametrically opposed to working on Xbox, but the small audience for the console in Japan means it's unlikely to ever become a viable platform for the RPG studio." Quote, "Falcom is obviously a Japan-focused developer and looking at the situation in Japan. The Xbox has a difficult time," Kondo added. "Because the market isn't there, we have to take a if things improve attitude and just pay close attention to what's happening. However, I want to point out that we're always paying attention to the market, particularly in terms of the foreign market, so if the Xbox was to have a sudden rise in the West, we'd obviously be open to considering it in that situation. I'd really like that to be the case." Kondo added he currently views the Nintendo Switch in the same way. "When the time came for us to move from PC to console development, we thought very carefully about Sony's platforms and Nintendo's platforms, and we thought it was more likely that many of the people who would play our games actually owned a 3DS. However, one of the trends of PC users is that they prefer gadgets and machines with higher spec, which obviously is something that Sony was offering there. So after really careful consideration of both sides, we decided it was more likely that the people who wanted to play the type of games we made want to play them on PlayStation's platform. So we decided to go with PlayStation. However, balance is very important too, and thinking carefully about when something should come out is important too. So there's definitely a big opportunity there for new platforms as well." So let's talk about this just a bit, because there's a lot of different information that we went over. So the first part, as far as NIS, they talked about Disgaea 5, as far as that coming to the Switch, and it paid off. That sold over 100,000 copies. It pretty much sold on par or more than the PlayStation 4 version so far, so that's pretty good. And at $60, and even when I look at the game, it still hasn't been discounted too much. So any copies that they're selling is still at the full price there, whatever they're getting restocks, and it was on the eShop charts just for a bit as well. When you have certain games like Disgaea, or you even have like what Falcom is talking about, which we'll get to in a bit, I definitely think that there's much more of an opportunity as far as the Nintendo Switch than there is with other platforms. And this is something that I've been talking about for years. Not the crap on the Xbox platform, but Microsoft in general hasn't been caring about Japan since the Xbox 360. They cared for the first 3 to 4 years where they were really trying to push Xbox games as far as in Japan, getting some of those exclusives, getting timed exclusives, and it paid off somewhat, not ultimately in the end, but it paid off because the Xbox 360 actually has well over 1 million install base in Japan, which is tiny compared to the other systems, but at the same time, if you're comparing that to what they did with the Xbox One, obviously it's a huge difference in terms of unit sales with stuff like Blue Dragon and Lost Odyssey and other games coming out to supplement the install base there. So if Microsoft would have continued that throughout the whole generation and then into the Xbox One, these developers probably would have been singing maybe a little bit of a different tune, but that is not the case. Now here's the thing, guys. Nintendo Switch has came up and as far as taken that spot and then some. Obviously the Wii U was not selling too great in Japan, although it did much better than the Xbox 360 and the Xbox One. It still was not selling up to par, not selling anywhere near the PS3 or Nintendo 3DS levels, so I can understand some of the tentativeness from the Japanese developers. On top of that, rumors probably went around in Japan that Nintendo was already working on their next system by 2015 because Square Enix said, hey, we're working on the NX. So there was really no incentive for these Japanese developers who were deeply rooted into the 3DS, PS Vita, some even PSP and PlayStation 3 and going on to PlayStation 4 to even worry about the Wii U and just continue what they're doing. But now that the Nintendo Switch is here, I definitely think you're going to see a lot of these developers, which you're already seeing, kind of moving over. Now, I understand what Falcom is saying here to kind of move over to the next point as far as picking what they wanted to do and that their customer base wanted more of the high-spec consoles. However, I will say with this now, because they're the ones who make the Trials of the Cold Steel as far as that series go, the Legend of Heroes, and I do feel that I think your base has also proved that they want a portable high-spec system. You said that, oh, well, your base wants high-spec gadgets. You make games for PS Vita, you make games for PS3 and the PS4. Now, your latest game, as far as with Falcom, the Legend of Heroes 3, that one came out on just the PS4. There was no portable base, and you guys lost more than half your sales, or around half your sales, based on things. I understand there's the digital sales that they're talking about with the PS4, but overall the sales have been pretty low, and it's pretty much dropped significantly on the Mediate Create sales charts in the 3rd week here. But you've pretty much lost a lot of your base because you decided not to go with the high spec portable device like the PS Vita was that. So I think to Falcom, because he's saying you have to pick PlayStation consoles and there's an opportunity, like he said here, I think you need to think carefully, like he said before, and make sure that you get that game on the Nintendo Switch, because that's where your base is. They like a high spec device that they can take around with them, and the Nintendo Switch is definitely that, because you guys didn't release it on PS Vita. But it pretty much makes sense kind of to get back to what he was talking about here with both of them as far as Microsoft and the Xbox platform. It's really not doing much. So I would say out there to Bandai Namco, because like I said, this is a combination as far as the discussion goes, talking about Microsoft is them not really supporting Japan at all, and Bandai Namco, who seems to be throwing everything at the Xbox One platform, which is understandable. Obviously they started making these games years ago. That's what was around. The Nintendo Switch was not around. But I definitely feel that Bandai Namco needs to stop asking people to port beg for their games and realize what's going on in Japan. It's paid off for other developers. We've seen Koei Tecmo have success. We've seen over here NIS America have success, and various other developers as well. So I do feel that they can definitely do this when it comes to Falcom and when it comes to Bandai Namco and some of these other developers. I think that they are definitely going to transition over. And there was an article that I talked about a few days ago, I think, where a lot of the developers were saying 2018 is really going to be that transition year for Japanese developers, and by 2019 everything is pretty much a go for the Nintendo Switch, because if you look at the demographics and if you look at what's going on in that country, you can clearly see that the Nintendo Switch is selling above and beyond any other platform there, because people do like the portability aspect, but you do have an HD system that can work with a lot of the games that Japanese developers make. I don't really think there's really anything that I've seen out of Japan Japan that couldn't come to Nintendo Switch, whether it's the Unreal Engine 4 Code Vein, or it's stuff like Dragon Ball FighterZ, which is also Unreal Engine 4. Stuff like Dragon Quest XI is already coming to the system as well. So there's already a lot of engines that it supports, and I think that Japanese developers will understand that. Now, in terms of Microsoft turning things around in Japan, I just don't think that's going to happen, and obviously they don't care. Why would they? The Xbox One platform is selling horribly in Japan. Some people even sell it as a Blu-ray player, like some of the articles that have already said out there. So I don't really think anything's going to turn around in Japan, and really it's going to be 3DS, it's going to be PlayStation 4, and it's going to be the Nintendo Switch going forward in the future. Although even with the PlayStation 4, while the sales are okay, I think it's 5 million in Japan, not bad at all. It has been multiple years now at this point, and the Nintendo Switch is fast, like catching up in terms of doubling up, sometimes even tripling up on sales, and that's even with some stock shortages and lottery lines that wrap around buildings once stock gets fully antiquated, which I think will happen probably by the end of this year or early next year. Expect the Nintendo Switch to probably hit 5 million in Japan by the end of next year, maybe even sooner than that, just depending on the stock. So I do feel that as far as Japan goes, there are some developers that got it and that are bringing the games, like Koei Tecmo. They've been fantastic. Attack on Titan 2 and everything, but there are still some developers that are going to get that transition over and really kind of changing their plans or switching from what Microsoft was doing in order to kind of get on the board with Nintendo. So we'll see what happens there, and overall Microsoft probably isn't going to care about Japan ever at all unless something crazy happens, but I just don't see them breaking into that market. They don't have the games as far as first party development, and they're not going to spend the money like they did last time because it ultimately ended up not doing much for them in Japan. So we'll see what happens going forward in the future. So let me know what you guys think about all of this. How do you feel about Microsoft in Japan? Some of what's happened with the other developers, the shifting over to the Nintendo Switch when it comes to certain games, stuff like BlazBlue, Cross Tag Battle. Obviously Square Enix has been with Dragon Quest, Lost Sphere, Project Octopath. Let me know about that in the comment section below. Alright guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Go ahead and check out the links in the description below. We've got Facebook, we've got Twitter. Go ahead and give us a like and a follow on our social media. It really helps us spread the content of PlayerEssence across the interwebs in addition to YouTube. Also make sure you check out our Patreon page, pledge any tier, be entered into win some awesome prizes. Plus we have Discord voice chat for our live streams and prize eShop tournaments. Also make sure you check out our brand new YouTube live gaming page and consider sponsoring PlayerEssence. When you do so, it works very much like Twitch, to where you can earn custom emotes for the chat. In addition to that, it gets you onto my friends list to participate in tournaments. So check out the link in the description below and consider sponsoring PlayerEssence right here on YouTube Gaming Live. Also make sure you hit that like button if you did like this video. Lets me know you guys want more content like this going forward in the future. And subscribe to PlayerEssence for the latest RPG, Japanese, and Nintendo gaming news. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you ninja for the next video. Peace!